They found a dying cop beneath the city. What the SEAL and his canine did next was life-changing. Beneath the frozen streets of Detroit, in tunnels that hadn't seen daylight in decades, a good man was dying alone in the dark. Above ground, corruption wore badges and walked freely. But they made one fatal mistake. They assumed nobody would care enough to look. They didn't know a Navy SEAL and his war dog were listening. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from. And if you want to support the channel, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. November in Detroit carried the kind of cold that didn't just chill, it accused. The wind swept down Michigan Avenue like an interrogator, finding every gap in clothing, every crack in resolve. The sky hung low and gray, pressing down on the city with the weight of old sins and older secrets. Snow hadn't committed yet, just threatened. Tiny crystals suspended in air that tasted of rust and regret. This was a city that had seen better days and worse nights, where abandoned buildings stood like tombstones marking the death of industry, and where the living navigated around the dead spaces with practiced indifference. The Corktown neighborhood sat on the western edge of downtown, a district caught between gentrification's promises and decay's reality. Craft breweries occupied corners where speakeasies once thrived during Prohibition. Young professionals walked past homeless veterans without seeing them. History and present collided here, sometimes violently, usually silently. The Michigan Central Station loomed over everything, 18 stories of Beaux Arts architecture left to rot since 1988. Its 1,000 windows like empty eyes watching the neighborhood's slow transformation. Most people avoided it, smart people anyway. The building had become a monument to abandonment, its Michigan limestone facade crumbling like the promises that built it. In a third-floor walk-up 2 blocks from the station, Jackson Reeves stood at his kitchen window, coffee cooling in his hand, watching the street below with eyes that never quite stopped being vigilant. At 34, he moved through the world with an economy of motion that spoke of training so ingrained it had become cellular. 6'2", 210 pounds of controlled power wrapped in worn denim and a canvas jacket. Dark hair showed premature gray at the temples, and a scar ran along his left jawline, a souvenir from Kandahar that he rarely thought about anymore. His hands, wrapped around the mug, bore the calluses of a man who'd spent years handling weapons and rope, climbing and fighting, surviving. He'd been in Detroit for 3 weeks, staying in his uncle's apartment after the old man passed. The place still smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and old books. Jack hadn't decided what to do with it yet. Hadn't decided what to do with himself, really. 8 months since the IED outside Kandahar had ended his career with Team 3, not the blast itself, which he'd walked away from with just the scar and ringing ears. But the kid they'd been escorting, the interpreter's son, hadn't walked away at all. The Navy called it medical retirement. Jack called it unfinished business with ghosts. Behind him, on a folded wool blanket near the radiator, Titan raised his head. The German shepherd's ears swiveled forward, tracking something Jack's merely human senses hadn't caught yet. 95 pounds of muscle, fur, and loyalty, forged in the same Afghan valleys that had carved Jack into something harder than the man who'd enlisted 12 years ago. Titan wasn't a pet, had never been a pet. He was a partner, a weapon, a brother who dragged Jack behind cover during that last firefight and refused to leave until the medevac arrived. When Jack retired, the Navy let Titan retire too. Some bonds even the military recognized as unbreakable. Jack's phone buzzed against the counter, the vibration loud in the quiet apartment. He ignored it. Probably his sister again, calling from California to check on him, to ask if he was eating right, sleeping right, doing anything besides staring out windows like some kind of ghost himself. He appreciated the concern. Didn't need it, but appreciated it. The phone buzzed again, then again. Not calls, messages. Multiple messages hitting some forum he'd joined months ago. One of those veteran networking groups his therapist had suggested. He'd posted maybe twice, mainly lurked. The community was good people, broken in familiar ways. Titan stood, stretched, padded over to press his muzzle against Jack's leg. The dog's dark eyes, old with things no animal should have seen, looked up with an expression Jack had learned to read as clearly as print. Something's wrong. Pay attention. Jack set down the coffee and picked up the phone. The messages were all tagging him, all pointing to one post in the Urgent Assistance subforum. He opened it. The profile picture showed a young woman, early 20s, African American. With her father's eyes, even though Jack hadn't seen her father yet. Sarah Webb, according to the username. Her post was 3 hours old, already had 47 replies, but nobody offering anything except sympathy. Sympathy. My dad is Detective Marcus Webb, Detroit PD, 28 years on the force. 3 days ago, he told me he had something big, something that was going to change everything. He never came home. I filed a missing persons report. They told me he's probably taking personal time. He's not. His phone is off. His partner says he's not working any special cases. I know something is wrong. My dad is the most reliable man I've ever known. He wouldn't disappear. Not like this. Not without telling me. I'm posting here because Dad's a veteran. Army MP, 2 tours in Iraq during the surge. I know he'd want me to reach out to people who understand. The police won't help me find a cop. Please, if anyone in Detroit can help, I'm begging you. Jack read it twice. Felt something shift in his chest, something that had been dormant starting to wake up. Titan leaned harder against his leg, a 95-pound reminder that some instincts shouldn't be ignored. 3 days. In Jack's experience, 3 days meant one of two things. Either the man was dead, or he was being held somewhere. And if Detroit PD wasn't looking for one of their own, that meant someone inside didn't want him found. He looked down at Titan. The dog's tail gave a single, deliberate wag. Yeah, they both knew Jack was going to do something stupid, something dangerous, something necessary. His thumbs moved across the screen before his brain could talk him out of it. I'm in Detroit. Former SEAL, trained in search and rescue. Send me everything you know. I'll find your father. He hit send and waited. Outside, the sky finally made good on its threat. Snow began to fall, soft and silent, covering the city's sins in temporary white. Somewhere out there, a cop was dying, and Jack had just promised to walk into whatever darkness had swallowed him. Titan moved to the door, sat at attention, waiting, not asking, knowing. Because duty didn't end when you took off the uniform. Some oaths never expired. Jack grabbed his jacket, checked the knife on his belt out of habit, and opened the door. The cold hit him like a wave, but he barely felt it. Behind him, Titan followed, a shadow with teeth, loyal beyond reason or survival. They were going hunting. Sarah Webb met them at a coffee shop on Michigan Avenue, the kind of place that roasted its own beans and served pastries that cost more than a meal should. She looked exhausted, dark circles under eyes that hadn't seen sleep in days. 20 years old, nursing student at Wayne State, according to her messages, but carrying herself with the rigid control of someone who'd learned early that falling apart wasn't an option. She wore her father's police academy hoodie, 3 sizes too big, wrapped around her like armor that didn't fit. Jack slid into the booth across from her, Titan settling beside him with the patience of a statue. The dog's presence drew immediate attention from other patrons, but one look at Jack's face convinced them not to comment. Sarah's eyes went to Titan first, then to Jack, and something in her shoulders loosened fractionally. Relief, maybe, or just recognition that she wasn't alone anymore. Thank you for coming, she said. Her voice carried the rasp of too much crying and not enough water. I didn't know who else to ask. The police keep telling me to wait, that he'll turn up, but I know my dad. He wouldn't do this. Jack kept his hands visible on the table, non-threatening, patient. Tell me about the last time you saw him. Sarah pulled out her phone with shaking fingers, scrolled to a text thread. 4 days ago, Thursday evening, he called me after his shift. Said he needed to talk about something important. Not over the phone, he said. He sounded excited but nervous. She looked up, eyes wet. My dad doesn't get nervous. 28 years as a cop, he's seen everything. But that night he was scared. Did he say what it was about? No, just that it was big, that it would change things. She swiped to a photo, turned the screen toward Jack. Marcus Webb smiled out from the image. 52 years old, gray beard neatly trimmed, kind eyes that had seen too much, but refused to look away. He was in uniform, arm around Sarah, at what looked like her high school graduation. We were supposed to meet for breakfast Friday morning. He never showed, never called. His phone went straight to voicemail. Jack studied the photo, committed the face to memory. You filed a missing persons report. Friday afternoon, when he didn't answer all day. She laughed, bitter. They took the report, but I could tell they weren't worried. One detective, his partner supposedly, told me Dad probably needed space, that the job gets to everyone eventually. She leaned forward, anger cutting through the exhaustion. My dad lost my mom 3 years ago to cancer. He didn't run then. He wouldn't run now. Titan's ears swiveled suddenly, focusing on something outside. Jack's awareness expanded instantly, cataloging the street beyond the window. A Detroit PD cruiser rolled past slowly, the officer in the passenger seat scanning the coffee shop with deliberate attention. Not routine patrol, looking for something. The cruiser continued down the block, disappeared around a corner. Jack brought his focus back to Sarah. Your dad's partner, what's his name? Detective Ruiz. Carlos Ruiz. They've worked together for 6 years. I need his contact information, and your dad's last known location. Sarah pulled up a map on her phone, pointed to a location near the riverfront. His car was found in the parking lot of this warehouse district Saturday morning. Doors locked, no sign of struggle. Police said it was probably abandoned there. She met Jack's eyes. My dad's service weapon wasn't in the car. He always locks it in the glove box when he's off duty. Always. Jack felt pieces clicking into place, forming a picture he'd seen before in other places, other wars. A cop who discovered something he shouldn't have. A nervous phone call. A disappearance that his own department wasn't investigating. Either Webb had run, which Sarah's certainty said was impossible, or someone had made him disappear. Someone with enough power to make a police investigation go away. Titan stood abruptly, positioned himself between Jack and the door. Low growl starting deep in his chest, barely audible but unmistakable. Jack's hand went to the knife at his belt, hidden under his jacket. 3 men had entered the coffee shop, moving with the false casualness of people pretending not to be together. 2 took positions near the counter. 1 moved toward the bathrooms. Cutting off the back exit, all 3 wore different clothes but identical shoes, tactical boots, broken in, recently polished. And the way they held themselves, weight forward, hands loose at their sides, spoke of training and anticipation. The one near the counter looked directly at Sarah, then at Jack. Recognition flickered across his face. He touched his ear, probably activating a radio, and started walking toward their booth. Jack stood smoothly, put himself between the approaching man and Sarah. Titan moved with him, a synchronized unit. Stay behind me, Jack said quietly to Sarah. Don't run, don't speak. The man stopped 6 feet away, hand resting on his belt, near where a concealed weapon would sit. Smile that didn't reach his eyes. You folks have a good day now. Maybe time to head home. His eyes flicked to Sarah. Your daddy wouldn't want you getting into trouble, would he? Sarah's breath hitched. Jack's voice came out flat, emotionless. We're just having coffee, not bothering anyone. The man's smile hardened. I'm saying it's not safe. Girl's father is missing. Emotional time. People make bad decisions when they're emotional. Hire the wrong kind of help. His eyes locked on Jack. The kind that might be suffering from PTSD, unstable, dangerous. Jack didn't blink, didn't move. Just stood there radiating the kind of stillness that combat veterans recognized as the moment before violence. Titan's growl increased in volume, fur rising along his spine. The man's 2 companions started moving closer, forming a triangle. The coffee shop's other patrons noticed the tension. Conversations dying, chairs scraping as people prepared to flee. Barista behind the counter reached for her phone. I think you're done with your coffee, the man said. His hand moved closer to his weapon. Jack's voice cut through the tension like a blade. You're comps, probably working for whoever doesn't want this girl, finding her father. You followed her here, or you've been watching her. Either way, you're making a tactical mistake right now. The man's smile vanished. You don't know what you're talking about. I know you're not going to do anything in a room full of witnesses with cameras. Jack nodded toward the security camera above the register. I know your boots are department issue, same as the radios you're using. And I know that if Marcus Webb is in trouble, threatening his daughter makes you part of the problem. For 5 seconds, nobody moved. The tension stretched like wire about to snap. Then the man's radio crackled, voice distorted but commanding. Stand down, not here, not now. The 3 men backed off, moving toward the exit with deliberate slowness. Never turning their backs, the lead one paused at the door. Girl should go home. Forget about this. People who don't forget, they have accidents. This city's dangerous. Then they were gone, disappearing into the gray afternoon. Jack waited 30 seconds, watching through the window as they climbed into an unlocked sedan 2 blocks down. Only when they drove away did he relax, fractionally. Sarah was shaking, hands pressed flat on the table. What just happened? Jack sat back down. Mind racing. Your father found something, something big enough that people are willing to threaten you to keep it buried. He looked at her directly. I'm going to find him. But you need to understand this isn't a missing person case anymore. This is something else. What do you need from me? A place to start looking. Somewhere your father would go if he was in trouble. Somewhere off the books. Sarah thought for a moment, then her eyes widened. The station. Michigan Central Station. When I was little, Dad used to take me there. Before they closed it completely. He said every cop should know the city's bones. The places that existed before the maps. She pulled up. Photos on her phone. There's tunnels underneath. Prohibition era. He showed me the entrances once. Jack felt it then. The certainty that comes from instinct, honed by 1,000 missions. Marcus Webb wasn't running. He was hiding. Or being hidden. Titan pressed against his leg, body tense, ready. The dog knew what was coming before Jack said it. Show me. The Michigan Central Station rose against the darkening sky like a monument to broken promises. 18 stories of limestone and steel, windows shattered or missing entirely, its grandeur rotted from within. Graffiti covered the lower floors in layers. Territorial markings from decades of urban explorers, homeless encampments, and ghosts. The city had fenced it off years ago, but fences only stopped people who wanted to be stopped. Jack circled the building twice on foot, Titan ranging ahead in controlled patterns. Both of them reading the terrain with senses shaped by war. Sarah followed 10 paces behind, silent now, trusting these two strangers because she had no other choice. The sun was setting early, as it did in November, bleeding orange into gray, turning the snow-dusted ground to rust. The entrance Sarah led them to wasn't obvious, a service door on the northwest corner, hidden behind dumpsters that hadn't been emptied since the Reagan administration. The lock had been forced recently, metal scratched bright where tools had worked. Jack knelt, examined the marks. Within the last 72 hours, someone came through here. Multiple someones. Could be urban explorers, Sarah offered hopefully. People break in all the time. Jack touched the ground inside the doorframe. Boot print in the dust, size 12, tactical tread. Same pattern as the men in the coffee shop. He looked up at Sarah. Stay here. If we're not back in 30 minutes, call this number. He handed her a card with nothing but 10 digits written on it. Woman named Rachel Cortez, FBI. Tell her Jack Reeves sent you and that you need immediate federal protection. Sarah's face went pale. You think my dad's in there? Jack stood, checked the knife at his belt, the small flashlight in his jacket pocket. I think if he is, he's not alone, and I think the people who put him there are still watching. He gestured to a coffee shop across the street with clear sightlines to the station. Go there. Sit by the window. If those cops come back, you'll see them. If anyone approaches you, scream. Make a scene. They won't do anything public. What if you don't come back? Jack's expression softened fractionally. Then you call that number and you tell Agent Cortez everything. She's clean. She'll help you. He didn't wait for Sarah to argue. Jack slipped through the door, Titan following like a shadow. The darkness inside swallowed them whole. The interior of Michigan Central Station smelled of rot and rust, decades of weather damage and human waste, creating an odor that coated the back of the throat. Jack's eyes adjusted quickly, aided by the last rays of sunset filtering through broken windows. The main hall stretched out like a cathedral to abandonment, its vaulted ceiling barely visible in the gloom. Columns that once supported architectural pride now supported nothing but pigeons and decay. Titan's nose worked constantly, processing thousands of scents Jack could never detect. The dog moved with purpose toward the eastern side of the hall, where a stairwell descended into deeper darkness. Jack followed, trusting his partner's senses absolutely. At the top of the stairs, he paused, listened. Water dripping somewhere below, wind whistling through broken walls, and something else, faint, rhythmic, like breathing. He pulled out his flashlight, covered most of the lens with his fingers to reduce the beam to a thin line. The stairs descended 2 floors, then opened into what had once been a maintenance level. Pipes ran along the ceiling, some burst and dangling, others still intact and sweating condensation. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. Jack's breath misted in the beam of his flashlight. Titan stopped suddenly, body going rigid. Ears forward, staring at a section of wall that looked solid. Jack approached carefully, ran his hand along the surface, found the seam, a door, painted to match the surrounding concrete, handle removed. He applied pressure. The door swung inward on hinges that moved silently, recently oiled. Beyond was a tunnel, not modern, old brick, probably from the 20s when rum runners moved Canadian whiskey under the river. The ceiling was barely 6 feet high, forcing Jack to duck slightly. Water covered the floor, 2 inches deep, cold enough to leach warmth through boots. The tunnel stretched into darkness that his small flashlight could barely penetrate. Titan growled, low and steady. Not aggression, alert. Someone's here, someone alive. Jack moved forward, each step deliberate, silent despite the water. His right hand stayed near his knife. 50 feet in, the tunnel branched. Left passage collapsed, filled with debris. Right passage descended further. Titan took the right without hesitation. The smell hit Jack 30 feet down. Copper and salt, blood and human waste. Someone had been here for days. Someone hurt. The tunnel opened into a wider space, probably an old junction where multiple passages met. Jack's flashlight swept across the area and froze. Marcus Webb lay against the far wall, hands zip-tied behind his back, legs bound at the ankles. His shirt was soaked black with blood from a wound in his abdomen, crude bandaging wrapped around it, already saturated. His face was gray, lips cracked, eyes half closed, but breathing. Still breathing. Jack crossed the space in 3 strides, dropped to his knees in the freezing water. Marcus, Detective Webb, can you hear me? Webb's eyes opened slowly, unfocused. Took several seconds to register Jack's presence. His voice came out as a whisper. Who are you? Friend of your daughter. Jack pulled his knife, cut the zip ties. Sarah sent me. We're getting you out. Webb's hand shot out with surprising strength, gripped Jack's wrist. No. They're watching. Waiting. Anyone comes for me, they'll know. Kill Sarah. Jack assessed the wound quickly, lifting the bandage. Gunshot, through and through. Probably missed major organs but caused severe blood loss. Webb needed a hospital hours ago. How long have you been here? 3 days. Maybe 4. Lost track. Webb's breathing was labored, each word an effort. Calabrese. Deputy Chief Vincent Calabrese. He's dirty. Moving product through the port. I found the manifests. Millions in narcotics. When I told my captain, he called Calabrese. They shot me. Dumped me here to die quiet. Titan positioned himself at the tunnel entrance, watching, listening. Jack pulled emergency medical supplies from his jacket, always carried since Afghanistan. Pressure bandage, clotting agent, pain medication. He worked fast, hands steady despite the cold. You're not dying here, detective, but I need you to stay conscious. Can you do that? Webb's hand found Jack's arm again. The phone. They took my phone, but I had a backup. Hidden. Taped under the service panel back there. Everything's on it. Evidence. Recordings. Enough to bury Calabrese and 20 others. Jack followed Webb's weak gesture to a metal panel on the wall, rusted but accessible. He crossed to it, pulled. The panel came free, revealing old electrical wiring and, taped to the back of the panel, a small smartphone in a waterproof bag. Jack pocketed it immediately. Footsteps echoed from the tunnel entrance. Multiple people, moving fast. Titan's growl escalated to a snarl. Jack killed his flashlight, moved to cover between Webb and the approaching threat. Pulled his knife, wished for the rifle he'd carried in Kandahar. Titan backed toward him, combat-trained, ready. Lights appeared in the tunnel, flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. 3 men, same tactical boots from the coffee shop, this time holding weapons openly. Pistols. Professional grips, moving in formation. The lead man's voice bounced off the brick walls. Should have minded your business, soldier. Now you're just another body in a tunnel nobody remembers. Jack's voice came out calm, flat. You're cops. You kill me and a federal agent already has my location. You'll die in prison. The man laughed. You're bluffing. Nobody knows you're here. Wrong. Jack's mind worked through tactical options. 3 armed men. 1 knife. 1 wounded civilian. 1 canine. 50 feet of tunnel. No cover. Mathematics of violence calculated in microseconds. My partner does, and she's very motivated. The men raised their weapons. Jack tensed, ready to move, to do what he'd been trained to do, to put himself between bullets and the man who couldn't defend himself. Titan launched first. 95 pounds of teeth and fury, crossing the distance before the men could adjust aim. He hit the lead man's gun arm, jaws clamping, weapon clattering into water. Jack moved simultaneously, closing distance, blade finding the second man's wrist, forcing him to drop his pistol. The third man swung his weapon toward Jack. A voice boomed from the tunnel entrance, amplified and absolute. "Federal agents, drop your weapons, on the ground now." Lights flooded the space. Tactical flashlights, a dozen of them, attached to a dozen FBI agents in full gear. Rachel Cortez stood at the center, FBI bold across her vest, pistol trained steady. Corrupt cops froze, then slowly, carefully, lowered their weapons. Jack called Titan off with a single word. The dog released, back to Jack's side, blood on his muzzle, but eyes clear, focused. Cortez moved forward, agents flooding past her to secure the corrupt officers. She looked at Jack without surprise. "Your girl called me 20 minutes ago, said you'd need backup." She gestured to Webb, and 2 agents with medical training rushed to him. "We've been building a case on Calabrese for months. Looks like you just handed us our star witness." Jack retrieved Webb's hidden phone from his pocket, handed it to Cortez. "And your evidence." Webb was being lifted onto a stretcher, IV already started, color returning fractionally to his face. He looked at Jack as they carried him past. "Thank you. Tell Sarah. Tell her I'm sorry I couldn't make breakfast." Jack nodded once. "Tell her yourself. You're gonna be fine." As the FBI cured the scene, Jack and Titan backed away, fading toward the exit. Cortez called after him. "You know I need a statement." Jack paused at the tunnel entrance. "You know where to find me." Then he was gone, climbing back through the station, emerging into the cold night where Sarah waited across the street. When she saw him alive, she ran. Jack caught her, held her steady. "He's alive. They're taking him to Henry Ford Hospital. Federal protection. You can see him soon." Sarah collapsed against him, sobbing relief and exhaustion. Jack let her, one hand awkward on her shoulder, while Titan pressed against them both. Above, the station's empty windows stared down like eyes that had finally seen justice. Not much, not perfect, but enough for one night. Enough for one oath kept. Jack's apartment became a tactical operations center within 2 hours of pulling Marcus Webb from that tunnel. The sparse furniture was pushed against the walls, creating open space. His laptop sat on the kitchen table, connected to an external hard drive where he'd copied everything from Webb's hidden phone, before turning the original over to the FBI. Rachel Cortez had understood the gesture. Sometimes you needed insurance, even when dealing with the good guys. Sarah sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, phone pressed to her ear. The hospital had called 30 minutes ago. Her father was stable, in surgery, prognosis good. She'd cried for 10 minutes straight, then pulled herself together with the discipline of someone who'd learned strength from a strong man. Now she was calling family, spreading the news that Marcus Webb was alive and coming home. Titan lay by the door, head on his paws but eyes open, tracking every sound from the hallway. Jack had wedged a chair under the doorknob, old habit from places where locks couldn't be trusted. The windows were covered with bedsheets, blocking sight lines from outside. Paranoid, maybe, but 3 corrupt cops had already tried to kill him today. Paranoia was just pattern recognition. Jack scrolled through the files on Webb's phone, each document a piece of a machine bigger than one dirty deputy chief. Shipping manifests from Detroit Port Authority, containers marked as automotive parts that weighed wrong, arrived from wrong ports. Wire transfer records showing money flowing from shell corporations to personal accounts. Photos of meetings between Calabrese and men whose faces Jack recognized from FBI wanted posters. This wasn't just corruption. This was infrastructure. A system built over years, possibly decades. His own phone buzzed. Cortez calling. Jack answered on speaker, kept his voice low. "Tell me something good." "Webb's in recovery." Cortez's voice carried exhaustion but satisfaction. "Surgery went well. He'll make a full recovery. And he's already talking. Gave us names, dates, locations. We've got arrest warrants being drafted for 17 officers, 4 Port Authority officials, and 1 very scared deputy chief. Where's Calabrese now?" "That's the problem." Cortez paused, and Jack heard papers shuffling. "He disappeared 4 hours ago. Left the precinct during shift change, hasn't been seen since. We've got his house under surveillance, accounts frozen. But he's gone to ground." Jack felt his jaw tighten. He knows Webb survived, knows the walls are closing. And he knows you're the one who found him. Your name came up during interrogation of those officers. Calabrese has your description, probably your address by now. If he's desperate enough, stupid enough, he might come for you. Let him. Jack's voice went flat, cold. Be easier than hunting him down. Jack, I can't officially sanction that. Cortez's tone said she absolutely could. She just couldn't say it on a recorded line. But I can tell you that Calabrese has connections beyond Detroit PD. The cartel he's been moving product for doesn't forgive failure. He's a liability now. They might solve our problem for us, or they might help him run. Not if we move fast. Cortez's voice sharpened. We're hitting the port warehouse tonight. Midnight. Full tactical team. Webb gave us the location of the main distribution center. If Calabrese is meeting his cartel contacts anywhere, it'll be there. One last desperate play to secure exit money before disappearing. Jack looked at the address Cortez texted through, memorized it instantly. You want me there. I want you nowhere near an active federal operation. Cortez's pause was meaningful. But I can't stop a concerned citizen from being in the general vicinity. And if that citizen happened to have specialized training in tactical observation, I certainly wouldn't complain about extra eyes on site. Understood. Jack ended the call, checked his watch. 6 hours until midnight. Enough time to prepare, to plan, to remember what he'd been trained to do. Sarah appeared in the kitchen doorway, blankets still wrapped around her shoulders. I heard. You're going after him. Jack didn't lie to her. Your father almost died because good men didn't act fast enough. I'm not letting Calabrese walk away from this. Take me with you. No. Jack's voice was absolute. You stay here. Door locked. Titan guards you. If anything happens to me, you call. All Cortez. Tell her everything, and you get yourself to that hospital. Your father needs you alive. Sarah's expression hardened, grief transforming into something fiercer. He almost killed my dad. Left him in that tunnel to die alone in the dark. I deserve to see him pay. And you will. Through a trial, through justice, through watching him spend the rest of his life in a federal prison. Jack moved closer, his voice gentle but firm. But you don't need blood on your hands to have justice. That burden is mine. Let me carry it. Sarah held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Promise me you'll come back. Promise me this ends tonight. Jack couldn't promise that. Combat had taught him that promises about tomorrow were lies dressed as hope. But he could give her this. I promise I'll do everything in my power to make sure Calabrese never hurts anyone again. Across town, in a luxury apartment overlooking the Detroit River, Vincent Calabrese poured his third whiskey and stared at the phone that wouldn't stop ringing. His handlers, the cartel representatives who'd made him rich and powerful. They weren't calling to offer escape routes. They were calling to confirm he understood the situation, that he'd become a problem requiring permanent solution. 58 years old, 32 years of service, and it came down to this. One cop with a conscience, one detective who couldn't be bought or scared. Marcus Webb should have died in that tunnel, should have bled out slowly, hypothermia and infection finishing what the bullet started. Instead, somehow, impossibly, he'd been found, rescued. By who? The question gnawed at Calabrese as much as the whiskey burned his throat. His men said a civilian, military-trained, with a combat dog, said the guy moved like a ghost, fought like a demon, and had FBI backup arrive with suspicious precision. That kind of coordination spoke of planning, resources, connections. Webb's daughter. Had to be. She'd found help somewhere. Some veteran who couldn't mind his own business. Some hero with nothing better to do than destroy careers and lives over principle. Calabrese's phone buzzed. Text from a blocked number. Port warehouse. Midnight. Bring everything or we leave you for the feds. The cartel, demanding one last meeting. They'd promised transport across the border, new identity in Mexico, money to start over. If he brought them everything. All the evidence that implicated them. All the records he'd kept as insurance. His leverage was now his ransom. He typed back, I'll be there. Then he opened his safe, pulled out the files he'd kept hidden for situations exactly like this. USB drives, printed documents, photographs. 32 years of corruption documented because Vincent Calabrese had never trusted anyone, not even his partners. These files would buy his freedom, or get him killed. At this point, the odds felt about even. He also pulled out his personal pistol, Glock 19, 15 rounds, hollow points. Not department issue. Untraceable. If things went wrong at that warehouse, he wasn't going quietly. Jack spent the intervening hours preparing with the methodical calm of someone who'd done this 100 times. He changed into dark clothes, tactical pants with reinforced knees, compression shirt under a jacket that allowed full range of movement. Checked his knife, added a second blade to his boot. No guns. He'd turned in his service weapon when he retired, and buying illegal firearms created paper trails he didn't need. He studied satellite images of the warehouse district, memorizing approaches, exits, sightlines. The target building sat isolated, surrounded by empty lots and abandoned structures. One road in, one road out. Tactical nightmare for approach, perfect for containment. FBI would set up perimeter, probably stage from the north, where old shipping containers provided cover. Titan watched from his position by Sarah, who'd fallen asleep on the couch despite her protests that she'd stay awake. Jack covered her with an extra blanket, then knelt by his partner. The dog's ears perked up, full attention. Tonight might get bad. Jack spoke quietly, hand on Titan's head. Worse than we've seen in a long time. I need you sharp, need you perfect. Can you do that? Titan's tail thumped once against the floor. Yes. Always yes. The dog would follow him into hell if asked. Had, actually, in places that felt pretty close. Jack checked his watch. 11 p.m. Time to move. He left a note for Sarah. Gone to finish this. Titan stays with you. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except me or Cortez. Your father is safe. Soon this will be over. Then he was out the door, moving through the cold Detroit night like smoke, heading toward the port, where men with badges and guns were gathering, where a corrupt cop was making his last desperate play, where justice and violence were about to meet on terms Jack understood better than most. The warehouse waited in the darkness, and so did the reckoning. The Detroit Port Authority sprawled across 2 square miles of industrial waterfront, a maze of shipping containers, cranes, and warehouses that handled millions of tons of cargo annually. Most of it legal, some. Me of it decidedly not. Jack approached from the east, staying low behind rusted containers that hadn't moved in years. Their original shipping labels faded to ghosts of commerce past. The target warehouse sat 300 yards ahead, a massive corrugated metal structure with loading bays facing the water. Lights burned inside, spilling yellow through gaps in the walls. 2 vehicles parked outside. Black Escalade with tinted windows, cartel transportation, and a silver BMW that records would show belonged to Deputy Chief Vincent Calabrese. Jack counted 6 men visible on patrol, 4 outside, walking perimeter patterns too regular to be casual. 2 inside, shadows moving behind dirty windows. All armed, though only the outside guards carried openly. Professional security, not police. Cartel soldiers protecting their investment. He'd arrived 30 minutes early, giving himself time to scout and position. The FBI was staging from the north as he'd predicted, waiting for Calabrese to incriminate himself before moving. Cortez had texted him once, simple message, eyes only, do not engage. Jack hadn't responded. Sometimes it was easier to ask forgiveness than permission. Movement to his left. Jack froze, became stone. A figure emerged from behind a container 20 feet away, bundled in layers of clothing that looked salvaged from dumpsters, pushing a shopping cart filled with collected scrap, homeless, probably living in this industrial graveyard. The figure stopped, turned, looked directly at Jack despite the shadows. You ain't FBI. The voice was male, rough with age and exposure. Too alone, too quiet. Jack remained still, assessing threat level. The man was old, maybe late 60s, white beard stained yellow, but his eyes were clear, sharp. Military bearings still visible under the decay of street living. Vietnam? Jack asked quietly. The man nodded slowly. Army, infantry, 173rd Airborne. Did 2 tours in the shit, came home to nothing. He gestured at the warehouse. You here for the cops? Something like that. They got that detective down in the tunnels. Left him to die like garbage. The man's face twisted with disgust. I seen them dump him. Wanted to help, but what am I gonna do? Cops don't listen to ghosts. Jack felt pieces connecting. You're Tommy Donovan. You were in the tunnels when Webb was shot. The old veteran's eyes widened. How'd you know that? Because you tried to keep him alive. Jack had seen evidence in that tunnel. Water bottles left within Webb's reach. A blanket that hadn't come from a cop. Someone had been checking on Webb, trying to help without being seen. You probably saved his life. Tommy looked away, embarrassed by acknowledgement. Couldn't just let him die. Man's got a daughter. Heard him talking in his sleep, calling for her. He met Jack's eyes again. You get him out? He's alive, in a hospital, going to make it. Tommy's shoulders sagged with relief. Good. That's good. Then his expression hardened. But these bastards are still breathing, still making money off people dying. Still think they own everything. Not for much longer. Jack checked his watch. 11:45. 15 minutes until the FBI moved. You should get clear. This is going to get loud. Tommy laughed, bitter. Son, I've been invisible in this city for 20 years. I can get places nobody sees, hear things nobody notices. You want in that warehouse? I know a way. Storm drain under the east wall. Opens right into their storage area. They don't even know it exists. Jack studied the old man. Why help me? Because somebody should. Tommy gestured at the warehouse. They move enough poison through here to kill thousands. Tills, powder, misery in boxes. I'm too old and too broken to stop it. But you? He assessed Jack with an experienced eye. You're still fighting. Still got purpose. Don't waste it. Jack made a decision. Show me. They moved through the container maze like ghosts. Tommy navigating with the confidence of someone who'd mapped every inch of his territory. The storm drain entrance was hidden behind stacked pallets, a rusted grate that Tommy pulled aside with practiced ease. The smell that emerged was terrible, but Jack had smelled worse in Kandahar. Comes out behind stacked crates inside. You'll have cover. Tommy handed Jack a battered flashlight. Battery's weak, but it'll get you through. When you come back out, if you come back out, don't look for me. I'm already gone. Jack took the flashlight. Thank you, Tommy. Thank your dog. Tommy smiled, showing missing teeth. Saw you with him earlier, scouting. German Shepherd, right? I had one in Vietnam. Best friend I ever had. He gestured to the drain. Go. Do what needs doing. Jack dropped into the darkness. The drain was barely 3 feet high, forcing him to crawl through water and substances he chose not to identify. 50 feet of claustrophobic darkness, then light ahead. The drain opened behind floor-to-ceiling stacks of wooden crates marked with legitimate shipping labels that definitely didn't match their contents. He emerged silently, water dripping from his clothes, and assessed. The warehouse interior was massive, 30-foot ceilings, stacks of containers creating corridors. And dead spaces. Voices echoed from the front, near the loading bay. Jack moved toward them, staying behind cover, closing distance. Calabrese stood in a cleared area, surrounded by 6 men with tactical gear and automatic weapons. Cartel soldiers, faces hard, eyes harder. Across from them, an older man in an expensive suit, gray hair slicked back, hands clasped behind him. The kind of calm that comes from being absolutely certain of power. You're late, the suited man said. His English was perfect, accent barely detectable. And you look desperate, Vincent. Desperation makes me nervous. I brought everything. Calabrese held up a leather messenger bag. Every file, every transaction, every name. This is your insurance and mine. You get me across the border, I stay quiet forever. The suited man gestured. One of his soldiers took the bag, began examining contents. After a long moment, he nodded. It's all here. Then we have a deal. Calabrese's relief was visible. When do we leave? We don't. The suited man's expression didn't change. You misunderstand the situation, Deputy Chief. You're not an asset anymore. You're a liability. And we don't transport liabilities across borders. We eliminate them. Calabrese's hand moved toward his jacket. The 6 soldiers raised their weapons in perfect synchronization. Calabrese froze. You really thought we'd let you live? The suited man shook his head. You've been compromised. Your detective survived. The FBI has witnesses, evidence. Even if we got you to Mexico, you'd be a target. The Americans would want you. Your former colleagues would want revenge. We'd spend resources protecting a man who's proven he can't protect himself. Bad investment. You'll kill me after everything I've done for you? Calabrese's voice cracked. I've made you millions, facilitated every shipment for 8 years, and we're grateful. The suited man nodded to his soldiers. Make it quick, respectful. He served his purpose. The soldiers advanced. Calabrese backed up, hand finally reaching his jacket. He pulled the Glock, swung it toward the suited man. The soldiers fired first. 3 shots, professionally placed, center mass. Calabrese dropped, blood spreading across expensive concrete. The echo of gunfire faded into vastness. Jack remained frozen behind his crate, mind calculating. 6 armed men, 1 suited executive. No clear shot, no weapon beyond knives. And in 90 seconds, the FBI would breach, drawn by gunfire. His mission was observation, intel gathering, not engagement. But Calabrese was dying on that floor. And the evidence in that messenger bag, original documents the FBI might never recover, was about to disappear across the border. Sometimes duty meant making stupid decisions. Jack stepped out from cover, hands visible, empty. The soldiers spun toward him, weapons tracking. Jack's voice carried across the space, calm and absolute. Federal agents are surrounding this building right now. You heard the gunshots. They're coming in hot. You've got maybe 60 seconds to decide if you want a shootout with the FBI or if you want to run while you still can. The suited man's eyes narrowed. Who are you? Nobody important. Jack held the man's gaze. Just someone who's really tired of watching criminals think they're untouchable. Kill him. The suited man gestured dismissively. The warehouse's main door exploded inward. Flashbangs detonated. Voices screamed. Federal agents, drop your weapons. On the round now. The cartel soldiers made their choice. They ran, abandoning their boss, sprinting toward the waterside exits. The suited man tried to follow, grabbing the messenger bag. Jack moved, covered the distance in 4 strides, tackled the man, drove him to the concrete. The bag skittered away. FBI agents swarmed the space, weapons drawn, controlled chaos. Jack rolled off the suited man, hands behind his head, assuming the position before anyone could mistake him for a threat. Cortez appeared, took in the scene. Calabrese dead, suit on the ground, Jack in submission posture. She knelt beside Jack, voice low. I told you eyes only. You're welcome, Jack replied. Cortez almost smiled. Almost. Get out of here before I have to arrest you for obstruction. Jack stood, retrieved the messenger bag, handed it to Cortez. Everything you need is in there. Names, accounts, evidence, Webb's insurance policy. Cortez took the bag, nodded once. Thank you. Jack walked out through the loading bay into the cold night. Behind him, agents were securing the scene, reading rights, calling for transport. Another mission complete. Another small piece of justice carved from chaos. Tommy was waiting by the containers, shopping cart loaded with new scrap collected during the excitement. Told you it'd get loud. Jack handed him 5 20s from his wallet. For the intel. Tommy took the money, tucked it away. You did good, son. That detective's daughter can sleep tonight. So can you. Jack gestured toward the city. There's a shelter on Michigan Avenue. Tell them Jack Reeves sent you. They'll give you a bed, hot meal, no questions. Tommy nodded slowly. Maybe I will. Been a while since I slept indoors. Then he shuffled away, pushing his cart. Another ghost in a city full of them. Jack walked in the opposite direction, toward home, toward a girl waiting to hear her father was truly safe, toward a dog who'd guarded her while his partner walked into darkness one more time. The night was cold. The city was broken. But tonight, just tonight, justice had sharp teeth. Jack returned to his apartment at 3 a.m, exhausted in the way that only comes from combat adrenaline finally draining from the system. Sarah was awake, sitting on the couch with Titan's head in her lap, watching the door with the kind of vigilance that said she hadn't relaxed once since he'd left. When she saw him, alive and whole, the tension broke. Is it over? Her voice was small, hopeful, afraid of the answer. Jack locked the door behind him, pulled the chair back under the knob. Calabrese is dead. The cartel leadership is in federal custody. The evidence is secured. Your father's testimony will put away everyone involved. He moved to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, drank it in 3 swallows. It's over. Sarah stood, cross to him, and without warning, wrapped her arms around him in a hug that spoke of gratitude too large for words. Jack stiffened initially, unaccustomed to physical affection from anyone except Titan, but slowly returned the embrace. She was crying silently, body shaking with relief and exhaustion, and everything she'd been holding back for days. "Thank you." The words came out muffled against his shoulder. "Thank you for finding him, for saving him, for not giving up when everyone else did." Jack patted her back awkwardly. "Your father saved himself. He held on long enough to be found. That takes strength most people don't have." Sarah pulled back, wiped her eyes. "Can I see him? Is he awake?" Jack checked his phone. Text from Cortez sent 20 minutes ago. Webb awake, stable, asking for his daughter. He showed Sarah the message. "Hospital visiting hours don't start until 8, but I think the FBI can make an exception. Get some sleep. I'll drive you there in a few hours." Sarah nodded, returned to the couch. Titan immediately reclaimed his position as her guardian, head back in her lap. Within minutes, she was asleep. The kind of sudden collapse that comes when the body finally believes it's safe. Jack stood at the window, looking out at the city as dawn approached. The sky was lightening from black to gray, another November morning that promised cold and little else. Somewhere in this sprawl of rust and resilience, Marcus Webb was healing. Somewhere, families were waking up unaware that the corruption poisoning their city had just been cut out like a cancer. Somewhere, Tommy Donovan was hopefully sleeping in a warm bed for the first time in years. Small victories, incremental justice. Not the grand heroics of movies, just one man found, one conspiracy exposed, one daughter reunited with her father. But Jack had learned in Afghanistan that wars weren't won in single battles. They were won in accumulated moments of people choosing to stand when it would be easier to walk away. His phone buzzed. Cortez calling. He answered quietly. "Tell me." 17 arrests so far. Cortez sounded energized despite the hour. 12 Detroit PD officers, 4 Port Authority officials, 1 cartel district coordinator. We're executing search warrants on homes and offices right now. The DA is already talking about the biggest corruption case in Detroit history. She paused. "This happened because you didn't walk away. You know that, right? I just found a missing man." Jack watched the sunrise paint the buildings copper and gold. "You did the rest. You found him when nobody else was looking, when his own department wanted him to disappear." Cortez's voice carried weight. "That matters, Jack. That changes things. For how long?" Jack's cynicism was hard-earned. "Detroit's been corrupt for decades. You arrest 17 people, 17 more will take their places. The system's broken, Rachel. We just put a bandage on it. Maybe. But Marcus Webb gets to watch his daughter graduate college, gets to walk her down the aisle someday, gets to live the life Calabrese tried to steal." Cortez's tone softened. "Sometimes the system is just individual people making individual choices. You chose to help. That's not nothing." Jack didn't respond immediately. Across the room, Sarah slept with one hand resting on Titan's fur, her face peaceful for the first time since Jack had met her. The dog's eyes were open, watching Jack, always watching, faithful beyond reason. "Loyal beyond survival. Webb wants to meet you," Cortez continued. "Properly, not in a tunnel where he's bleeding out. I told him you prefer to avoid attention, but he insisted." "When?" "This afternoon. Henry Ford Hospital, room 417. Federal protection detail outside, so bring ID." Cortez paused. "Bring the dog too." Webb asked specifically about him. Apparently he remembers Titan licking his face in the tunnel. Thought he was hallucinating. Jack almost smiled. "We'll be there." He ended the call, finally allowed himself to sit. His body ached in a dozen places, bruises forming where he'd hit concrete, muscles strained from crawling through drains and moving. Moving through combat stances. He wasn't 25 anymore, wasn't even 30 anymore. The recovery time was getting longer, the price higher. But the alternative was sitting still while good people died in the dark. And Jack had learned in 12 years of service that he wasn't built for sitting still. At 8 in the morning, Jack drove Sarah to the hospital in his uncle's old truck, Titan in the back seat, the three of them moving through a city that was waking up to news of massive arrests and corruption exposed. Radio stations were already covering it. shock and vindication mixing in reporters' voices. The deputy chief of police, dead in a shootout with cartel operatives. A respected detective, found dying in abandoned tunnels. Testimony bringing down an empire. They didn't mention Jack's name. That was fine. He didn't want recognition, didn't need it. The work was the reward. Sarah was silent during the drive, nervous energy radiating from her. Jack glanced over. He's going to be okay. Surgery was successful. He's weak, but stable. I know. Sarah twisted her hands in her lap. I just keep thinking about how close it was. If you hadn't found him, if you'd been a few hours later. But I wasn't. Jack's voice was firm. Don't torture yourself with what-ifs. Focus on what is. Your father is alive. He's going to recover. That's what matters. Why did you help us? Sarah looked at him directly. You didn't know my dad. Didn't owe us anything. You could have ignored my post. Let someone else deal with it. Why you? Jack was quiet for several blocks. Because I know what it's like to lose people. To feel helpless while they die and you can't stop it. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. And because sometimes being trained to fight means you have a responsibility to fight. Not just against foreign enemies, but against anything that threatens innocent people. Your father was innocent. You were innocent. The choice wasn't complicated. But it was dangerous. You could have died. Jack nodded. Could have. Didn't. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. Jack pulled into the hospital parking lot. Some people are born to build things. Some are born to create art, or cure diseases, or teach. I was born to stand between good people and bad situations. That's my purpose. Has been since I enlisted at 22. Just took me a while to realize it doesn't end when you take off the uniform. They walked through the hospital corridors, Titan drawing immediate attention from staff and patients. Sir, this dog, Jack said repeatedly, showing documentation. Visiting a patient who requested him specifically. The FBI detail outside room 417 confirmed their identities and waved them through. Marcus Webb looked dramatically different from the dying man Jack had found in the tunnel. Clean, bandaged properly, color returning to his face. IV drips fed medicine and fluids. Monitors beeped steadily. He was sitting up slightly, and when Sarah entered, his face transformed with joy and relief. Baby girl. His voice was rough, but strong. Come here. Sarah rushed to his bedside, carefully avoiding the tubes and wires, and buried her face in his shoulder. Webb wrapped his arms around her, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring reassurances. I'm okay. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Jack stayed by the door with Titan, giving them privacy. But Webb looked past his daughter, locked eyes with Jack. You're the one who found me. Jack nodded once. Detective Webb. Marcus. Call me Marcus. Webb gestured Jack closer. Sarah told me everything. How you responded to her post within hours. How you tracked me down. How you pulled me out of that tunnel and kept me alive. His voice thickened with emotion. I owe you my life. You owe me nothing. Jack moved closer, but maintained respectful distance. I did what anyone should have done. But nobody else did. Marcus's expression hardened briefly, anger at his own department's betrayal flashing through. Nobody except you. He looked at Titan, smiled. And your partner. I remember him in the tunnel. Thought I was dreaming when this massive dog started licking my face. Kept me warm until you got there. Titan's trained in medical alert. Jack's hand rested on the dog's head. He knew you were alive before I did. Smart dog. Marcus extended a hand. Titan padded forward, allowed Marcus to scratch behind his ears. Thank you, boy. You saved me too. Sarah had composed herself, wiping tears. Dad, the FBI says you're going to testify, that the case is solid. It is. Marcus's jaw set with determination. Calabrese kept meticulous records, probably for blackmail. But those records are evidence now. Every dirty cop, every compromised official, every cartel connection, it's all documented. He looked at Jack. Cortez told me Calabrese is dead, that you were there when it happened. I was. Jack's expression revealed nothing. He made choices that led to consequences. Good. Marcus's voice carried no sympathy. He deserved worse than a quick death. But at least he won't hurt anyone else, won't corrupt anyone else. His legacy ends here. They talked for another hour. Marcus sharing stories about his years on the force, about his wife who'd. It passed 3 years ago, about his pride in Sarah's nursing studies. Jack mostly listened, adding comments when addressed, more comfortable observing than participating. But something shifted in that hospital room. A connection formed between 3 people and one dog who'd walked through darkness and emerged intact. When visiting hours ended, Sarah hugged her father again, promised to return tomorrow. Marcus caught Jack's arm as he turned to leave. Whatever you need. Whenever you need it. Marcus's grip was surprisingly strong. You call me. I don't care if it's the middle of the night, if it's dangerous, if it's impossible. You helped me when nobody else would. I don't forget debts like that. Jack met his eyes. Just get better. Be there for your daughter. That's payment enough. Outside in the parking lot, Sarah turned to Jack. What happens now? For you, I mean. Jack looked toward the horizon, where the city spread out in all its broken glory. I go home. Wait for terminal leave to finish. Figure out what comes next. You could stay in Detroit. Sarah's voice was hopeful. The city could use someone like you. The city needs people like your father. Jack unlocked the truck. People who wear badges and work within the system. I'm better at operating outside it. They drove back in comfortable silence, the kind that exists between people who've shared something profound. When Jack dropped Sarah at her apartment, she hugged him one more time. You're a good man, Jack Reeves. Don't let anyone tell you different. Jack waited until she was safely inside before driving away. Titan shifted in the back seat, pressed his nose against Jack's shoulder. The gesture meant home, meant rest, meant mission accomplished. Tomorrow would bring paperwork, statements, probably media attention Jack would actively avoid. But tonight, he and Titan would sleep knowing Marcus Webb was alive. Sarah had her father back, and somewhere in Detroit, corruption had suffered a defeat it wouldn't quickly recover from. Not a perfect ending, but real life rarely offered those. Just moments of imperfect justice, grabbed from the jaws of tragedy by people stubborn enough to care. And sometimes, that was enough. 3 days after pulling Marcus Webb from that tunnel, Jack stood in front of the bathroom mirror, razor in hand, staring at a face that looked more tired than it should. The exhaustion wasn't physical anymore. The bruises had faded to yellow. The aches had subsided. This was deeper. The kind of weariness that comes from carrying weight you didn't know you'd picked up. His phone had been ringing constantly, news outlets wanting interviews, podcasters requesting his story, even a book agent who'd somehow gotten his number. Jack ignored them all. Fame was a distraction. And he'd never operated for recognition. The work was its own reward. But one call he'd answered. His sister, Angela, checking in from California. She'd seen the news, connected dots, recognized her brother's fingerprints all over the case, even though his name hadn't been mentioned. Jack, you can't keep doing this. Her voice had carried worry and frustration. You're out. You're supposed to be healing, not running into burning buildings. I found a man who needed help. Jack had kept his tone neutral. That's all. That's never all with you. Angela had sighed. When are you going to accept that you deserve peace, that you've given enough? Jack hadn't answered. Didn't know how to explain that peace wasn't absence of conflict. It was knowing your purpose and living it. And his purpose, apparently, was standing between good people and the darkness that wanted to swallow them. Now, 3 days later, Detroit was transforming around him. The corruption investigation had expanded beyond anyone's predictions. 23 arrests, 5 city council members implicated. The mayor had called for a complete audit of the police department. Federal oversight was being discussed. Marcus Webb's testimony had become the foundation of the largest anti-corruption effort in Detroit's modern history. And Jack had been at the center of it, invisible but essential. A knock at his door pulled him from reflection. Titan's ears perked up, but the dog didn't bark. Friendly, known. Jack checked the peephole. Sarah stood in the hallway, holding a casserole dish, looking nervous. He opened a door. Sarah, everything okay with your father? She smiled. He's being released tomorrow. Doctors say his recovery is remarkable. She lifted the dish. I made you dinner. Lasagna. My mom's recipe. It's the least I could do. Jack stepped aside, let her in. You didn't have to do that. I know. Sarah set the dish on the kitchen counter, turned to face him. But I wanted to. Needed to, actually. Her expression became serious. I've been thinking about what you said, about purpose, about having skills that create responsibility. Jack crossed his arms, leaning against the wall. Dangerous thoughts, maybe, but true ones. Sarah took a breath. I'm changing my major. From nursing to criminal justice. I want to be a prosecutor. She met his eyes with determination that reminded him of her father. What happened to my dad, to this city, it happens because people look away. Because good people decide it's not their problem. I don't want to be someone who looks away. Your father would be proud. Jack felt something like respect settle in his chest. It's hard work. You'll see things that stay with you. You did. Sarah gestured around the sparse apartment. And you still chose to help when it would have been easier to walk away. That's who I want to be. Someone who doesn't walk away. They ate dinner together. Tighten position between them, hoping for scraps. Sarah talked about her plans, her studies, her determination to honor her father's integrity by carrying it forward. Jack listened, offered occasional advice about resilience and compartmentalization, about staying human when you spent your days confronting humanity's worst. My dad wants you to come to dinner. Sarah said it casually, but Jack heard the weight behind it. Next week, when he's home and settled. Nothing fancy, just family. She paused. You're part of that now, whether you like it or not. Jack's first instinct was to decline. He wasn't family, wasn't even really a friend. He was someone who'd done a job, fulfilled a responsibility, and should fade back into the background where he belonged. But looking at Sarah's face, seeing the genuine hope there, he found himself nodding. I'll be there. Sarah's smile lit up the room. Good. Fair warning. My dad invited half the neighborhood. Everyone wants to meet the mysterious veteran who saved Detroit's hero cop. You're going to be very uncomfortable. Jack grimaced. Looking forward to it already. After Sarah left, Jack sat on the couch with Titan sprawled across his lap, heavier than any dog should reasonably be, but somehow exactly where he needed to be. The apartment was quiet, except for the dog's breathing and the distant sounds of the city outside. Traffic. Sirens. Life continuing its messy, complicated flow. His terminal leave ended in 4 weeks. After that, he'd officially be a civilian. No more military structure, no more chain of command, no more mission parameters handed down from above. Just a 34-year-old former SEAL, with skills that didn't translate well to office jobs, and a dog trained to detect explosives in a country where such detection wasn't usually necessary. What do we do next, buddy? Jack scratched behind Titan's ears. The dog looked up at him with eyes that held complete trust and zero answers. Helpful as always. His phone buzzed. Text from Cortez. Call me when you can. Something you should know. Jack dialed immediately. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Cortez's voice carried something that might have been excitement. Actually, everything's very right. The case you helped break, it's got attention beyond Detroit. I've been contacted by the deputy director. They're creating a new task force. Corruption and organized crime, domestic focus, federal jurisdiction. They want people with your skill set. I'm retired. Jack's response was automatic. From the Navy, yes. Not from making a difference. Cortez let that sit for a moment. This would be consultant work, independent contractor basis. You'd work cases where federal agents need someone who can operate outside normal protocols, someone with tactical training, investigative instincts, and a dog who's better at finding people than most technology. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you purpose. Cortez's tone became serious. You pulled Marcus Webb from a tunnel because it was the right thing to do. Imagine doing that officially. With resources, support, legal backing. You could help a lot of people, Jack. Jack looked at Titan. The dog's tail thumped against the couch once. Maybe. Or maybe it was just coincidence. But it felt like confirmation. I'll think about it. Jack's voice gave nothing away. That's all I ask. Cortez ended the call, leaving Jack with silence and possibility. The next week passed in a blur of statements, depositions, and paperwork. Jack spent hours at the FBI field office, walking through his timeline, his decisions, his observations. Cortez sat in on most sessions, occasionally steering conversations away from areas that might make Jack uncomfortable. She was good at her job. Better, she understood people like him. Marcus Webb was released from the hospital on Tuesday to fanfare Jack actively avoided. News cameras, city officials, community members, welcoming home a hero. Jack watched from Titan's living room, relieved to be nowhere near the spectacle. Webb had earned recognition, deserved every bit of praise and gratitude, but Jack's contribution felt different, felt like something that worked better in shadows. The dinner was Friday evening. Jack arrived exactly on time, Titan on a lead beside him, both of them equally uncomfortable with social situations. Sarah answered the door, pulled him into the warmth of a house filled with people, food, and noise that made Jack's instincts scream for exit routes. Marcus appeared immediately, still moving carefully, but looking healthier than he had any right to after what he'd been through. "Jack, thank you for coming." He gripped Jack's hand, pulled him into a brief hug that Jack tolerated stiffly. "Come meet everyone. They've been dying to thank you." The next 2 hours were an exercise in polite endurance. Neighbors wanted to shake his hand. Family members wanted to hear the story. Children wanted to pet Titan, who bore the attention with patient dignity. Jack answered questions with minimum words, deflected praise, and counted the minutes until he could reasonably leave. But then, as the crowd thinned and the evening quieted, Jack found himself on the back porch with Marcus, both of them holding beers. Looking out at a small backyard dusted with fresh snow. "You hate this," Marcus said it with amusement, not judgment. "Not my environment," Jack admitted. "Give me a hostile situation with clear objectives. I'm fine. This," he gestured at the house full of people, "this is harder." Marcus laughed. "You saved my life, and you can't handle people saying thank you. That's beautifully broken, Jack." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Marcus spoke again, voice quieter. "I've been a cop for 28 years, seen a lot of people, done a lot of good, I hope. But what you did, finding me in that tunnel, it was different. You had no obligation, no duty, just chose to help because someone needed help. That's what decent people do." Jack took a drink. "No," Marcus shook his head. "That's what exceptional people do. Decent people feel bad and do nothing. You felt bad and did something." He met Jack's eyes. "Whatever comes next for you, wherever you end up, know that you made a difference here. Real, permanent difference. This city's healing because you gave it a chance to." Jack didn't know how to respond to that. Settled for a nod. Inside, Sarah was organizing leftovers, packing containers for Jack to take home. Titan sat in the kitchen, surrounded by children who were reading him stories, the dog's expression suggesting he'd accepted his fate with resignation. This was family, Jack realized. Not the one he was born into, but one forged through crisis and survival. The Webbs had adopted him, whether he'd intended it or not. And standing in that warm house, watching people who'd been strangers a week ago treat him like he belonged, Jack felt something shift. Maybe Cortez was right. Maybe purpose wasn't found in isolation. Maybe it was found in connections, in communities, in choosing to stand with people instead of apart from them. He looked at Titan, who'd managed to escape the children and pad over to press against Jack's leg. The dog looked up at him with an expression that clearly said, "Ready to go home yet?" "Soon," Jack promised. "Soon." But for now, for this moment, he let himself stay. Let himself be part of something that felt almost like peace. Not the absence of conflict he'd been seeking, but something better. The presence of people worth fighting for. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. 3 months after pulling Marcus Webb from that tunnel beneath Detroit, Jack stood on the same corner where this had all begun, watching snow fall on a city that looked different now. Not transformed, nothing that dramatic, but cleaner somehow, lighter, like a weight had been lifted, allowing people to breathe easier. The corruption trials were underway. 17 officers had pleaded guilty, seeking reduced sentences in exchange for testimony. 5 were fighting the charges, but the evidence was overwhelming. Marcus Webb had spent weeks on the witness stand, his testimony dismantling decades of institutional rot with the precision of a surgeon removing a tumor. The city was healing, slowly, painfully, but genuinely. Jack's phone buzzed. Text from Sarah. "Dad's testimony wrapped today. Final defendant convicted. It's really over. Celebration dinner tonight. You better be there." Jack smiled, despite himself. He'd been to 4 dinners at the Webb house in the past 3 months, each one slightly less uncomfortable than the last. He was learning, slowly, how to exist in spaces that weren't combat zones or empty apartments. Titan was learning too, growing accustomed to children's hands and family noise. Another text, this one from Cortez. "Decision time, Jack. Task force launches next month. I need your answer." The offer had been sitting on his mental desk for weeks. Independent contractor for a federal anti-corruption task force. He'd travel, take cases where someone with his particular skills could make a difference. Good pay, federal backing, legal protection for the kind of work that operated in gray areas. Everything he'd been doing anyway, but official. The hesitation wasn't about the work. It was about the commitment. Accepting meant acknowledging this was who he was. Not a soldier trying to be a civilian, but something else entirely. Someone who stood between innocent people and the darkness that hunted them. A protector without a uniform, but with the same oath. Jack looked down at Titan, who sat beside him, watching the city with alert eyes. "What do you think, buddy? Should we make it official?" Titan's tail wagged once, slow, deliberate. The dog's version of yes, obviously. Now can we get out of this cold? Jack pulled out his phone, typed a response to Cortez. "I'm in." "When do we start?" Her reply came instantly. "Already have your first case. Missing federal witness. It's in Baltimore. Disappeared from protective custody 3 days ago. Marshals think she's dead. I think she's hiding. Could use someone who's good at finding people who don't want to be found. Send me the file." Jack felt something settle in his chest. Purpose, direction, the clarity that comes from finally accepting what you were built to do. He walked back to his apartment, Titan ranging ahead, both of them moving through the city with the easy confidence of people who belonged. The apartment didn't feel temporary anymore. Jack had unpacked the last boxes, hung pictures, bought furniture that suggested permanence. His uncle would have approved. Inside, Jack spread the case file across his kitchen table. Melissa Torres, 32, key witness in a federal racketeering case. Disappeared from a safe house in Baltimore. Marshals found no sign of forced entry, assumed she'd fled or been taken. But her daughter, 9 years old, was also missing. And mothers don't run without their children unless they have no choice. Jack studied the woman's photo, scared eyes trying to look brave, the expression of someone who'd seen too much and was paying the price for doing the right thing. He'd seen that look in Marcus Webb's daughter. Seen it in 100 refugees in Afghanistan, the look of people caught between doing what's right and surviving. His phone rang. Marcus calling. Jack answered. "Detective, it's done." Marcus's voice carried relief and exhaustion. "Every single defendant convicted. Sentences ranging from 15 to 40 years. It's really finished. How do you feel?" "Tired, vindicated, ready to get back to actual police work." Marcus paused. "Sarah told me you took the FBI consultant position. That true?" "It is." Jack kept his tone neutral, waiting for judgment. "Good." Marcus's approval was clear. "World needs more people like you, Jack. People who don't wait for permission to do the right thing. Just promise me something." "What's that?" "Don't disappear on us. You're part of this family now, whether you like it or not. Come back to Detroit between cases. Let us feed you, annoy you, remind you there's more to life than the next mission." Jack felt warmth spread through his chest. "I promise." After the call, he sat with the case file, planning his approach to Baltimore. Titan rested his head on Jack's knee, patient as always, ready for whatever came next. Outside, night was falling on Detroit, streetlights flickering on, the city settling into its evening rhythm. Jack's laptop was open to a news article about the Webb case. The reporter had done a feature on unsung heroes, people who'd contributed to bringing down the corruption ring, but remained unnamed. One paragraph caught his attention. Sources say a military veteran, acting as a private citizen, was instrumental in locating Detective Webb and providing evidence that broke the case open. This unnamed individual reportedly asked for no recognition, no compensation, simply the satisfaction of knowing justice was served. In a city often defined by its struggles, this anonymous act of heroism reminds us that Detroit's strength lies not in its institutions, but in individuals who refuse to accept injustice. Jack closed the laptop. Anonymous was fine. Better than fine. The work mattered, not the credit. He looked around his apartment, really looked, and saw what had changed. Photos on the wall now. Him and Titan. Marcus and Sarah. The Webb family dinner. Tommy Donovan, cleaned up and sober, working at a veteran shelter Jack had connected him with. Small moments, captured and displayed, evidence of connections that had grown despite Jack's instinct to remain isolated. This was what came after war. Not silence and solitude, but purpose redirected. The same protective instinct that had driven him to enlist at 22. The same oath that had carried him through 12 years of service. It didn't end. It evolved. Changed theater from foreign battlefields to domestic streets, from military operations to individual acts of intervention. Jack packed his go bag. Habits from a decade of deployments making the process automatic. Clothes, documents, medical supplies, tactical gear. Titan's travel kit, food and water bowls, vaccination records. Everything needed for rapid movement. Baltimore was 8 hours by car. They'd leave at dawn. But first, dinner with the Webbs. Jack changed into clean clothes, checked his appearance in the mirror. Still looked like someone more comfortable in combat and conversation. But Sarah said that was part of his charm. Jack wasn't sure about charm, but he was learning to be present. Learning that strength wasn't just physical, that courage wasn't just facing enemies, that duty extended to showing up for people who cared about you. The Webb house was warm with cooking smells and laughter when Jack arrived. Sarah answered the door, pulled him into a hug. He now returned without stiffness. Dad's making his famous chili. Fair warning, it's actually terrible, but we all pretend it's good. I heard that, Marcus called from the kitchen. Dinner was chaotic, loud, everything Jack's military life had never been. Multiple conversations happening simultaneously, people interrupting each other, laughter erupting over small jokes. Titan lay under the table, receiving contraband food from children who thought they were being sneaky. Jack sat back, watched, let the noise wash over him. This was what he'd been fighting for all those years. Not abstract concepts of freedom or democracy, though those mattered, but this. Families sitting together safely, children laughing without fear. People living ordinary lives because someone stood between them and the extraordinary darkness that threatened to consume them. After dinner, Marcus pulled Jack aside. Heard you're headed to Baltimore tomorrow. FBI case? Jack nodded. Missing witness. Probably hiding, possibly in danger. Same thing you did for me. Marcus's expression was knowing. Finding people everyone else has given up on. It's what I'm good at. Jack met his eyes. And it feels right, like I'm finally using everything the military taught me for what it was always supposed to be for. Protecting people who can't protect themselves. Just remember, you're not invincible. Marcus gripped his shoulder. You've got people here who care about you, who want you coming back. Don't make Sarah add you to her list of people to worry about. I'll be careful. Jack made the promise, knowing it was only partially true. Careful had limits when someone's life was on the line. Driving home later, Titan asleep in the passenger seat, Jack thought about trajectory. How a random forum post from a desperate daughter had pulled him out of isolation and reminded him who he was. How one decision to help had cascaded into purpose, connection, a future that looked nothing like the solitary existence he'd been settling for. The city passed by his windows, Detroit in all its broken beauty. Abandoned buildings next to renovated homes, decay and renewal existing side by side. A city that refused to die, that kept fighting, kept rebuilding, kept believing it could be better than its worst moments. Jack understood that impulse. He'd spent years fighting, first in foreign deserts, now in domestic shadows. The battlefield changed, but the mission remained constant. Stand between good people and bad situations. Use strength to protect weakness. Refuse to accept that evil could operate unopposed. Back in his apartment, Jack made final preparations for Baltimore, checked his gear, reviewed the case file one more time, set his alarm for 5 a.m. Titan watched from his bed, knowing tomorrow meant work, meant purpose, meant doing what they'd been trained to do. Jack sat on the edge of his bed, looking at the photo on his nightstand. Him and his team in Afghanistan, young and invincible, before the IED, before the medical retirement, before Detroit. He barely recognized that version of himself. That Jack had been fighting someone else's war, following orders, executing missions handed down from command. This Jack, the one who'd found Marcus Webb and was heading to Baltimore to find Melissa Torres, he was fighting his own war, choosing his battles, operating on his own authority with his own moral compass. And somehow, that felt more honest than anything he'd done in uniform. He looked at Titan. The dog's eyes reflected the dim light, patient and loyal, and ready for whatever came next. Brothers in arms, even without the formal structure of military service. Partners in purpose. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stand. One person who sees injustice and refuses to accept it. One person who uses strength, not for dominance, but for protection. Jack had been that person in a tunnel beneath Detroit, would be that person in Baltimore, would keep being that person until his body gave out or the world ran out of people who needed help. Which meant he'd never stop, because the world would never run out of people who needed help. And Jack was finally okay with that. More than okay. Grateful. Because purpose wasn't a burden to carry, it was a gift to embrace. He lay down, hand resting on Titan's head, where the dog had moved to lay beside the bed. Tomorrow they'd drive to Baltimore. Find a woman everyone else had given up on. Bring her and her daughter back to safety. Do what they did best. But tonight, Jack Reeves slept peacefully in a city that was healing, surrounded by people who'd become family, secure in the knowledge that his oath hadn't expired with his service. It had just found a new way to matter. Outside his window, snow continued to fall on Detroit, covering old scars, promising new beginnings. The city kept breathing, kept fighting, kept refusing to surrender. Just like Jack. Just like everyone who'd ever stood when it would have been easier to walk away. Because somewhere out there, someone was waiting for a hero. And when duty called, Jack and Titan would answer. Always. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and hit that like button. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Jack's position? Would you have answered Sarah's call for help? Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that there are still people in this world who stand up for what's right. Because sometimes, just sometimes, one person with courage can change everything.